Okay, you guys, we are back with another video. Now, I know that my voice sounds like it needs WD-40, but don't pay any attention to that. We're going to talk about Jamaica, my country, my island, the government here being pressured to let go of the current agreement that they have with the Cuba doctors and nurses who resides here and provide health care. Now, first thing first, they're not working for free, okay? So I want you guys to understand that. No, Jamaica and Cuba, we have had an amazing relationship going all the way back to slavery. Normally, during the days of slavery, if there was a rebellious slave, right, they would get kicked out of Cuba, or sometimes they would escape Cuba, come to Jamaica, they would be accepted, and they'll be treated fair. So we have a relationship with Cuba going all the way back. So much so that Cuba was like, Jamaica, we're going to build you guys a high school. And that high school is called Garvey Maceo High. It's also a training camp for the Cuban military as well, because Cuba, they were up there when it came to their military um, regime, right? But since then, Cuba and America, they've been at war. If you know anything about the Cold War, that was Cuba and America, right? So ever since then, Cuba and America, they have been going back and forth at it. Now, many people don't know that Cuba has done a lot of stuff because Cuba is so tiny. Many people look at Cuba as a tiny little island. How can Cuba affect America? But they have, and they have done it for decades. They have spies that they have sent into America before. I've watched like all the documentaries and stuff, so I know what I'm talking about, right? As we would say in Jamaica, little but talawa. That is Cuba, right? They're tiny, very small, but they're powerful. Now, ever since the Cold War and all of that, and Fidel Castro and all of that, there has been an embargo on Cuba, right? So this embargo has restricted the shipments of certain goods and services into Cuba. When Barack Obama became president of the United States, Barack Obama basically, had a meeting with the Cuban government, and he tried to, not try, he basically lightened the embargo on Cuba. He lightened it a bit. But when Trump came back into administration, Trump was like, no, no, embargo on Cuba again. So Trump has been putting his foot in Cuba's neck. Trump is saying, um, no one can sell any oil, no petrol to Cuba, because any country that sells Cuba any petrol, they will be sanctioned just the same. Like, there'll be like a 30% tariff. In some cases, it might be 50% or more, right? So, as such, everyone were like, okay, we don't want this. So, Cuba has been having electrical problems for the past couple of years, right? But ever since last year into this year, things have really gotten bad for the Cuban citizens. And as such, you guys would know that Mexico and CARICOM came together and we sent some aid to Cuba. Now, Jamaica has always worked with the Cuban government, wherein Jamaicans would travel to Cuba to further their education or for healthcare purposes, like eye surgery, eye care treatment, and all of that. We've always had that kind of relationship until it became something bigger. where the Cuban nurses and doctors, they would come here and they would treat, you know, people with cataracts and, the different eye surgery, and people would regain their sight. And then we had the Cuban nurses and doctors coming in, working in our medical facility. Now, you guys know that ever since Donald Trump came back into office, we had Marco Rubio came to Jamaica, had a discussion with our prime minister. We have no idea what they had discussed. But the moment we saw Marco Rubio coming to Jamaica, we knew it was about the Cuban nurses and doctors. And when he left and we didn't see anything happening, we believe, okay, the government basically worked out something between the Cuban government, the American government, and the Jamaican government. But no, honey, nothing was worked out. Now, fast forward to at present. At present, the contract with the Cuban government and the Jamaican government as it relates to the doctors and nurses, that contract is coming to an end, right? Now, the Jamaican government has offered the Cuban nurses and doctors to pay them directly because when they come to Jamaica, their salary is not paid to them directly, allegedly. Their salary is paid to the Cuban government directly, okay? And it's alleged that the American government believes the Cuban government is using that money to create nuclear, like poisonous substances and all of that, allegedly, right? Um, there was one recent documentary about the Havana plague or something like that. You guys can look it up. A few Americans who were in Cuba, they ended up with, you know, a particular kind of illness, and they gave it the name the Havana plague or something to that effect, right? So the American government allegedly believes that this is how the Cuban government has been funding their weapons against them, the United States. And Cuba and Russia, they're also friends. Cuba and China, also friends. Jamaica, we're friends to all, enemies of none. But what America is doing, based on what I'm understanding, if BRICS, if Venezuela joined BRICS, then Cuba would have joined, then the rest of the Caribbean islands would have joined the BRIC nation, the US dollar would become irrelevant. And that is what Trump is trying to mitigate, allegedly. Hence why he went into Venezuela, because Venezuela was going to join the BRICS nation, and Venezuela was going to sell its oil, to other countries and all of that jazz. Trump invaded Venezuela, captured their president, and all of that jazz. So now it's being alleged that the American government has applied pressure on the Jamaican government with threats of sanctions and all of that jazz, allegedly. But the Jamaican government is saying the American government is not the reason for this. But the Jamaican people is saying we know it's the American government. And ever since the announcement was made that, the Jamaican government is restructuring the program with the Cuban government, there was a representative from the American government that came out and said they're happy to hear the news. So, what the Jamaican government is now offering the Cuban doctors and nurses, they're offering them to stay here and pay them directly. So if they stay here, all their earnings, it will go to them directly instead of going to the Cuban government. And then the Cuban government would give them a stipend, right? So that is what the American government wants to end. So our Jamaican government has put the offer on the table for the Cuban nurses and doctors for them to stay here and they can work and they can collect their pay directly from the Jamaican government. But we don't know if they're going to accept that offer because remember that Cuba provides free education to all. And these Cuban doctors and nurses, they may feel like they are betraying their leader. They may feel some sense of loyalty, and as such, they may not take the offer. But things are not looking good. It's not looking good for the world at this point. Things are especially not looking good for Cuba because Donald Trump is saying after he's done it with Iran, he's going to go to Cuba next. We don't want Trump in Jamaica because we don't want any war here. We don't have any military. We have a military, but at the same time, we don't have one because our force, it's very small because we've never had the need to go to war with anyone, right? So we don't have the resource, we don't have the manpower or anything to go to war against America or any other country for that matter. So as such, we are caught between a rock and a hard place because we've had such a amazing relationship with Cuba for years, for so many decades. And now this is causing a rift between, the Jamaican government and the Cuban government because the Cuban government is saying he's surprised to see, the Jamaican government actually bending over for the American government. But at the same time, I have to say, to be very honest, what is happening in Cuba, it's horrible because like basic necessities, toothpaste, toilet paper, they don't have, right? It's a scarcity. It's rarely there. And if that shit should ever happen in Jamaica, these Jamaicans, being the Israelites and the Jews that they are to their core, they would get up and burn this country every day. If they should get up and their cell phones don't have internet service, they're gonna watch on day one to see what's going on. Day two, they're gonna start going off on everyone. And day three, they're gonna burn the country to the ground. Day four, they're gonna get up and burn it back all over again. Day five, they're gonna rinse and repeat, right? So as such, the people are dragging the Jamaican government saying that, half of the population is saying Jamaican government is too weak. The next half is saying the Jamaican government is doing the right thing. But for the half who are saying that the Jamaican government is too weak, if those people should wake up one day in Jamaica and there's no toilet paper or any toothpaste, irrespective of the fact that we have so many alternatives to toothpaste and toilet paper, they would burn the country down, honey. They would burn it down to the ground without hesitation or remorse. And they would get up and burn it down again on schedule the following day. So those people are just blobbing. They really don't understand the magnitude of what is happening. This is not easy. It's not easy for Jamaica. It's not easy for Cuba either. But I believe, and this is my personal opinion, I believe the Cuban government needs to put its people first at this point. Put its people first and their well-being. It's not what he wants to do, but I think he should have some kind of meeting with the American government because things are getting really bad over there. And I want our Caribbean neighbors to be well. And we just want peace in this region, you know? Peace. This region is not accustomed to that kind of war. We're accustomed to the little, internal affairs that we have, but not war and bombs and all of that. No, this region is not accustomed to that. But that's just all. Just that's my 2 cents on what is going on. You guys let me know what's your take. Leave your comment below. And we're going to talk some more in the comment section. Peace.